1, 2, that's you and me. We go for a stroll by the side of the sea. I just can't seem to comprehend what's the point of all the sand. What's the ocean? What's the land? I'm going off the end. Oh, 1, 2, that's you and me. We go for a stroll, and our guide is the breeze. Freely we're blown by the wind. The birds have their wings, and the fish have their fins. Where do we fit in? Oh, down you go. All right. I'm glad I finally had that song that's been in my head for a very long time. Got to make it a little more real today. I really liked how it came out. In most of them. But, anyway. Today I'm going to finish talking about Metroid. Last time, down you go. Last time, I talked about Dread, finished up Dread, and finished up Hunters. So today I'm going to say what little I have to say about Prime 4, a little bit about Other M, and then just talking about various aspects of Metroid that I think are important, and that I'm going to finish up with. So, first, starting off with Metroid Prime 4. I don't know if I'm really going to say much because you can find... First off, there's not a lot to say on the game's own merit, on its own substance. And I'm sure you can find lots of people who are talking about it or have talked about it. I can just go over the talking points right now. Let's see, did I have anything specifically written down? Let's see. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I have it. Okay. So, let's see. Let me look at my list. Discuss. Capable. SAX. Actually, tense moments. X-Parasites. Malfunction or catastrophe. Elune, the first 3 Emmy. Being stuck underwater. Return to areas where their inherent tension of walking. Okay. Yeah. So I'm just going to... I'll go over some... Oh, kitten. You know you're not supposed to be there. I love you. Yes. I so much as tap you, and it's like I've... got, like, spikes on my hands or something. I love you. Down you go. Down you go. No. Alright, you can't eat that. You can't eat that. That's not good for you. That's person food. I have to put that away if you're gonna do that. There you go. Down you go. Alright. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yes, Metroid Prime 4. Going through a quick list of it. Here's some things I like. I like the balance that they struck between the realism and a little bit of stylization. I really think they found a really good balance. They kept searching for it, and I think this is probably one of the best balances they've had. 2. I think the what's it called? Viola suit, I think it looks really cool. It looks good. Another thing, I think most of the music it varies in quality. But, I think the Fury Green track is rather good. It does that excellent job of balancing all the different aspects. I think I mentioned it before already, so I won't get into it too much. That Prime 4's music does a really good job of mixing in production with the more experimental. For the most part. I wouldn't say there's a lot of... Like, there's a reason I'm only bringing up the Fury Green... The Fury Green... track. I'd say there's also Ice Belt is pretty good. One thing about Prime 4's soundtrack is it's I saw a stream today that I thought was really funny where a person said that Prime 4's soundtrack insists on itself, and the other people who were in the stream kind of like went quiet for a second. But the thing is that like that's ultimately a vague bit of criticism and a matter of taste, but also funny because he specifically brought up the choirs, and it's like that's just kind of a staple of. But I mentioned it before that Metroid Prime's soundtrack, mainly for the first game and the tracks of the second game, it's a little garish sometimes, but it balances out. The more you hear it, the more you get used to it, and the more you realize it's not your typical soundtrack, that's for sure. Metroid Prime soundtrack. And it is a little, like, blunt and upfront. I wouldn't quite say the term insists on itself, but it's certainly going straight for the feeling that it's going for. Like, yeah, most Metroid Prime music is gonna leave an odd taste, especially the first time around. Oh, come on. There you go. But also, I know you're gonna go after that thing, so that's why you were in timeout. Because you knocked the thing over, so you're gonna have to go here. It's not safe for you to be around that. It's not good for your little cat self. So you stay right there for now. Okay, there you go. Okay. Let me think. Yeah, Metroid Prime's music, I already mentioned, it is very forward and uses interesting instrumentation. I think this is the best the choirs have actually sounded. But I think the strength of the individual compositions is not consistent and distinct for a lot of it. There are ones that I really like the ice belt. I like that when the it's that and the Volt Forge, when the generator turns on, it goes oh, and you have the there's parts of that where I think it fits rather well, and you have the Fury Green soundtrack as well. But I'm going to be honest with you, there aren't a lot of tracks besides those ones that really stick to my mind. Besides, here's the thing about Prime 4's soundtrack. It really leans into those shredding guitars. It's a little indulgent. Here's the thing I will say about Prime 4's soundtrack. It's very indulgent compared to Prime 1, 2, and even 3. The sheer amount of tracks using that, like, how would I even describe it? Like, young choir voice? It's like young boys choir. That's kind of the first thing that pops into my mind when I think of how to describe it. But I will say there are a lot, and maybe that's just Kenji Yamamoto thinking, like, the civilization of the Lemorne is going to have a little more of that than typical, but there are a lot of tracks in Metroid Prime 4 that use choir or that, like, solo young voice, or that that, like, operatic female vibrato. And it is quite a bit, I will say. it's more than typical for the amount of choir going on. I again with the comment of like it insists upon itself. Like even then, th- it is just like how Metroid Prime music is. You just have to get used to it. You know, it's very upfront, very blunt with what it is. It's going straight for like space and darkness and danger. So you got these spooky choir, but it just depends on how your taste for how things like choir are used. Like I wouldn't agree necessarily with the person that choir be only used for the thing that he was like that his preference has, you know, for why you use choir. Uh, that's the least of the issues, really. I think with Prime 4's soundtrack, it's mainly just uninteresting use of a lot of its musical elements, mainly. There are a few standouts, but having like Zelios' theme where it's like dum 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 dum. It's a that's a bit much. Like it's losing again. It's a little. It's indulgent in the same way the motorcycle is indulgent. It's indulgent in the same way that the bike is named Viola. Like there's indulgence in kind of every aspect of Prime 4. Indulgence from Kensuke Tanabe's part, a little bit of indulgence from Kenji Yamamoto's part. I would say like there's a lot more tracks in like Prime 1 and 2 where there's no choir and it's just like electronic sounds, like Torvis Bog and the depths of Talon Overworld. Phendrana Drift's Depths. Does Phendrana Drift's Depths have the female voice? I don't actually know if it does or not. I'd have to listen to it again. But I think it's also just the variety of different voices and choirs that are used. Again, it depends on mileage, taste, and actual execution of doing it. It doesn't bother me that he said that, because I had that feeling too when I first heard Prime's soundtrack. Was that feeling of like, this is really indulgent. This is a little... it's a little tacky. But when it comes to Prime 1 and 2 at least, that tackiness soon turns into like appreciation for what it's doing. And it's like, okay, yeah, this really does fit with... Let's think about Prime music versus like classic 2D Metroid music, is that Prime music tends to fit much better when you have the game with it. Although a lot of Prime 1 soundtracks like do stand alone when removed from the game as well. It's like a good balance of both. But when you get to Prime 4 and like Dread, it's a little too much of just, you gotta pair it with the visuals, you know? To the point where they kind of lose distinction. And same with like Prime 2 to an extent. But why are you sitting like that, kitten? Come on. There you go. There you go. Yeah, there you go. I see there's something under you that's making it uncomfortable. There you go. Okay. But yeah, Prime 4's music, it's like it has highs. I wouldn't say it has lows. There's no lows I can think of. It's just like high to medium in terms of its quality. The other thing, you know, quick notes about Prime 4. I'll talk about that when I get to Silux and his whole thing. But actually, let me write those notes down. Silux, not just him versus Dark Samus, but also... Oh, I need to plug in my keyboard again. Silux, Plan, P2 kitten. Involvement. Phase 2. Okay, there we are. Let me think. There's so many other people who can describe better things like the Federation troopers, the issues with them. They're like different variations of the same general character. They have really no depth at all. Surface level meant to tug on you, surface level just like likable, but there's really nothing to them. You could replace them. You could replace all of them with anyone else, and you don't lose much. No enemy variety. Even the enemies that there are basically only do like a few things. I like the Grievers as a concept, but again, nothing in Prime 4 ever goes far enough. Really, like ever. Here's what I'll say about the Grievers. I thought it was interesting how the Grievers were like an alternate evolution of the Lemore, not a mutation. That when they searched for mutations, they couldn't find any. It just turns out that the Grievers were the Lemorans set on a more predatory and like hunter type path. It's like they had alternate genes and something like that, and those got activated, and it would it forced like a split in their evolution. I thought that was interesting, but didn't lean into it enough. I would have loved to have seen just make an area out of the Grievers. Just have like Griever hives, and that's an area. There should have been stuff like that. Like have the Grievers not just be mindless creatures, have the Grievers become like an ecosystem. And they almost form like a new society, like the Lemorn intelligence converted into forming like animal dynamics with, groups and pairings and hunters and ones who like defend and others who go out and hunt and others with more specialized body types. And, I think it would have been interesting to have had the Grievers expand into a whole like ecosystem of variations of Grievers and showing an alternate version of the Lemorn with a more animalistic path. And they behave more like animals. Not just mindless, mob creatures that go around slashing and killing. Because when I look at them, I wonder, like, what are they doing with each other? What are they doing? Do they attack each other? It doesn't seem like they do. But what do they do otherwise? Do they just sit around waiting for an unsuspecting Samus to show up and bump her ankle on a table and lose all her abilities or something? And then do they just wait for unsuspecting nobody is on the planet, so what are the Grievers doing exactly? Are they just hanging around? I don't imagine they have much to do when Samus isn't there. But yeah, it should have like had the Grievers evolve into their own thing and had more like interactability with, maybe have like psychic visions with the Grievers. That would have been really cool if there were like Grievers who, because they had the gems implanted in their minds. It would have been interesting if there were Grievers who still sort of had that. The green energy. It's Phazon. It's replacement Phazon, and they just called it green energy. Anyway, but having the Grievers like that, I think that would have been really interesting if you had gotten to access maybe like dormant memories, or if Grievers with like psychic gems maybe held a little more consciousness, if that makes sense, a little more intelligence, and they like evolved slightly different, and they had maybe more, they can like float around and wave their hands around and do psychic thing, like they really evolved in like an alternate intelligence kind of way, rather than the utilitarianism that comes with being humanoid, they evolved the more predatory hunter type intelligence, and you'd be able to sort of interact with memories with grievers, and maybe like resuscitate a few, even just for a second, and sort of like reach out. That I think that would have been a pretty interesting story, and have give the grievers actually something to do. But moving on from that, from the grievers, I mean there's like not. Fury Green is, it's such a Potemkin village. It gives this appearance that of what the game is going to be, and then it's just seeing those first trailers and imagining all the cave systems and layers of the world and all that, and then in the actual game, that's it. That's pretty much. That's it. It's just a few spaces, and then the whole thing is over. And that's if they front load you with the creatures, and like, you know, enough to feel prime-like, and then that's it. It never really expands from there. Also, the fact that you never actually get to get up close with the memory tree. You barely even really know what the memory tree is beyond just the vague description. Like, what exactly is the memory tree? Again. It should have been more of exploring that giant tree that is important and foundational to this society. You just get to look at it in Fury Green, but that's it. Like, anyway, another thing I wanted to talk about is just the order of certain items. Something that when I first saw gameplay of Prime 4 that stood out to me immediately is the really dumb order that they introduce the psychic platforms and you get the psychic boots, that basically by the time the psychic platforms are introduced, you already have the psychic boots. Most likely, by the time you encounter them, or they introduce the psychic platforms, immediately give you the psychic boots. So why were they ever psychic platforms? You could have just made them normal platforms. You gave me the solution to a problem I was never going to encounter without the solution. So what was the point of making it a potential problem when you gave me the way to solve it before you ever encounter it? So why even have them be? And then the rest of the game just has psychic platforms, as if there's more psychic platforms later, as if as if they needed to be psychic platforms at all. You get the solution to the psychic platforms before you even really encounter the psychic platforms. They could have just been normal platforms. The only difference between those and having normal platform... Oh, that's actually something I want to talk about really quick. Really quick before I forget. I really like how Prime 1, 2, and 3 contextualize a lot of their platforming elements and different, gamey things. They find lots of fun ways to turn them into in-world things, like parts of the scaffolding, rocket-boosted platforms. Oh, man. In Prime 4, that makes me think they could have had, areas held up by psychic energy, and that explains why there's, floating platforms and things like that. You could have had the psychic energy construct, an area, or hold up an area. Anyway. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah. So psychic platforms are pretty much useless. The only thing that separates them from normal platforms is that you have to scan them with your psychic visor. Yeah. So there's not much really to those at all. Another thing I want to mention is I thought it was pretty compelling how you get there and you meet the last Lemorne, but again, that doesn't go anywhere either. I'll talk about the Metroid. Let me write that down, the whole Metroid thing. The Metroid that controls minds. Anyway, there we go. Wrote that down. So, Viola's a dumb name. It's one of the every name in Prime 4 completely takes me out of the game entirely. Fury Green, Flare Pool, Volt Forge, Green Energy, what else? Betsy, Phil. I'll get to that in a sec. But, Viola, the Viola suit. Why would an alien civilization name their motorcycle? Like, I get it could mean something. You know, Metroid means the Ultimate Warrior in Chozo. Viola could mean. But the thing about Metroid is it's at least a portmanteau of two different words, and if you didn't know that, it just sounds cool. Metro Android. Metroid. It's got that spacey, alien feeling. Metroid. But then you get Viola, and it's just Viola. And also it's purple, like violet. So, and it's just called Viola. This is an alien species. This isn't the Galactic Federation who names their soldiers like Agnes and Duke and Castor. You know, they have the typical names. Anthony, Ian. But, you know, their ships, they're like the GFS Olympus, Valhalla. At least in Prime, that's the naming scheme they go with for... also, I just noticed they didn't even carry that into Prime 4. In Prime 4, they completely stop using the Greek mythology or the mythological naming schemes that they used for the other Prime games. I guess there was like the Stiletto class fighter, but still, there was the majority of Galactic Federation things had a naming scheme that had to do with mythology, and yet not a single thing in Prime 4 actually uses that naming scheme. But anyway, on to the next thing I wanted to talk about is... How do I want to phrase this? Maybe I'll just talk about Sylux now instead of saving him for later. Yeah, I'll talk about Sylux now. So Sylux's plan is revealed to be that he's just going around trying to get his own and just get as much tech stuffed into his suit as possible. So he has no real concrete plan. It's not even really explained why he teamed up with the space pirates or what the relationship is. They don't all have Metroids fused to them. So it doesn't seem like he's mind controlling all of them. So the opening of the game is Sylux and the space pirates arriving, or already there, attacking the planet Tanimar in the Desalon system. And, you know, there's no voiceover, or he doesn't talk, so there's no way to ascertain his goals, so you're kind of guessing. And then it's revealed that, no, he had no real plan. He wasn't even really there for the artifact. He didn't even know what the artifact was, or what it did, or what it was for, or had any research notes. He was just going around raiding bases for cool items and tech. That's all he was doing. So he gets to the base. Silex gets to the base, starts attacking it, and which means that when he didn't even know Samus was going to show up. So he wasn't luring Samus to the base. He didn't plan anything. Silex had no plan. He was just like, "Hey, space pirates, let's go attack this base." And the space pirates are like, "Okay, cool, guy. I guess we're working for you now." And he goes to attack the base, and Samus shows up, and he's like, so he didn't know Samus was going to come, or that Samus was going to get involved. She was not even like a factor in what he thought was going to happen there. So Silex immediately gets worked by Samus at the start of the game. He wasn't tricking her. He wasn't trying to. It wasn't like a Samus is like, "You missed," and he's like, "Did I?" And then he shoots and then it turns out he shot the artifact and it gets teleported. No, he actually just lost the first confrontation with Samus. He immediately gets worked by Samus. Maybe that's why they call it getting jobbed, or being a jobber, jobbing. He immediately gets worked over by Samus, and their very first encounter. He didn't mean to shoot the artifact. They had their little, standoff, kind of, again, mirroring Dark Samus's standoff with Samus in Echoes, but in that one, Dark Samus really isn't aiming for Samus, because Dark Samus has more information than Samus does. So she shoots the crystal that's protecting Samus from Dark Aether's atmosphere. And so there's like a whole twist to that scenario. And so it's not like they did a smart thing by not making it so that either one of them had to win the quick draw. Because the goal on Dark Samus's part was never even to hit Samus first. It was to shoot the crystal that was protecting Samus, that Samus didn't know was protecting her. But in the first Good, the Bad, the Ugly, Leon-style quick draw duel of Prime 4, Silex just loses. He's immediately, dropped by Samus right onto the ground. She immediately styles all over him, and he's just a buffoon. He just looks like a buffoon. Immediately, I remember thinking that when I first saw the trailers and the gameplay. Like, what? He immediately just gets dropped like that? Oh, I can't really tell if he had a plan or not. It seemed like he was aiming at Samus and he hit the thing. We'll just have to see. But no, he really did just lose the confrontation. And Samus hopped out of the way, immediately hits him with her beam, and that's it. That is their only true confrontation until the final boss. He immediately gets knocked down by Samus. And the only thing that's stopping him from getting defeated after that, or further getting beaten up by Samus, is the fact that the teleporter goes off. And he didn't even know that was going to happen. So the entire story is just one huge coincidence. It's not even like Samus choosing to go out of her way to get involved in part. No, actually, not even. She gets called by the Galactic Federation to go check it out. So she's not even here of her own volition. The entire story setup is just a really big series of coincidences. Samus, the artifact, happens to be a teleporter for the Lemorn. Silex happens to be there at that base going to go get it. And then Silex, unfortunately, the artifact happens to be behind Samus when she dodges. Didn't know it was a teleporter, but it turned out to be a teleporter. So He went there with absolutely no plan, not even knowing really what he was doing. Ah, I thought about it so intently, I just completely blanked on what I was talking about. So, let me just continue. Not on what I was talking about, but just like the thought process that I had. I got so intensely into it. Let me rethink. Recompose myself. Mm. Right. It's the fact that all of it was just like a complete coincidence, that all of these things happened to come together. Silex didn't even know that was going to happen. And so Samus ending up on Vuros is a complete fluke, really. That's what it was. Agency is the fact that Samus goes to this planet on Galactic Federation orders, and all these things just kind of happen to make the story start. Whereas before, Samus finds the distress signals from the, Orpheon, and she goes there, and then sees the experiments, and it naturally leads into, following Ridley and continuing her mission to investigate this whole space pirate thing that's going on Talon 4, which naturally evolves into discovering the existence of Phazon and then dealing with the Metroid Prime. Or Echoes, where she answers the call from the Federation troopers, ends up on Aether. And gets, in the course of trying to help them, discovers they're already dead, gets wrapped up. I mentioned this last time, just keeps getting wrapped up in further conundrums. Like, Dark Samus, her involvement there doesn't even really matter. That's just cherry on top. And I'll get to that in a little bit. That's just cherry on top of the whole thing. But the thing is that when the thing about both scenarios in Prime 1 and Prime 2 is that the distress signals and what she's getting involved in directly has to do with what the issue on the planet is. So the space frigate pirate ship Orpheon, it's not just randomly having a meltdown or self-destructing completely unrelated to Phazon. The struggle and the incident on Orpheon is happening because of Phazon-enhanced creatures and their experiments. This is just the outermost shell of what the space pirates are doing, what their operation is on the planet Talon 4, and Samus is investigating, and it's just she's just getting roped in further. This is the outermost part of the whole Phazon incident on Talon 4, and then she just gets pulled in deeper and deeper and deeper until she finds the Metroid Prime. Same with Prime 2 Echoes. The soldiers aren't just randomly getting picked off by some animals or space pirates, and then, also, there's a portal here that happens to lead to another dimension with creatures called the Ing. But that had nothing to do with the soldiers. Like, no. The soldiers are sending out the distress signal because they are attacked by the Ing. Everything has to do with what is the main, crux of the plot, the main conflict. But in Prime 4, none of this has to do... And Prime 3, it's the clearest one. Again, Samus is just hired by the Galactic Fed to go deal with the problem. It's what it is. There's not much else to say about that, Samus, we're calling you up. Go defend this thing. Dark Samus is there, It's kind of the step towards what Prime 4's opening is, but like the middle ground. It's not egregious, it's just what it has to be for the story that they wrote for that to just happen. But, it at least, revolves around Dark Samus being up to no good. It's not the most interesting opening. It's just, military stuff. Sort of generic military stuff. But Prime 4's opening, on the other hand, the conflict is with space pirates and mind-controlling Metroids. And that's what's causing all this. Whom you will never see again. Over an artifact that no party actually knows what it does. That happens to teleport you to the plot-relevant planet. Well, of course, it doesn't just happen to teleport to the plot-relevant planet. It is the story teleporter to the plot-relevant planet. But just happens to be involved in this whole situation. So Silex doesn't have some foreknowledge of the Lemorn, and he's targeting this base to get their technology. There's no, thread that guides the opening of Prime 4 through to the Lemorn on Vuros. There's no through line. What's causing the incident on the planet Tanamar that Samus is called by the Galactic Fed to do? Apparently Samus was on a recon mission? What was she doing there? I don't know. That sounds more interesting than the opening of Prime 4. So Prime 4, it opens up with that, and you've got space pirate. The incident on Tanamar is being caused by space pirates and Metroids, and a completely oblivious Silex who doesn't actually know what he's doing. And 2 out of the 3 of those things you're never going to see again. Truly. The Metroids, half you're never going to see again. You're never actually going to see one of those Metroids ever again. They're just going to be weak points later on for bosses, but you never actually see them apart. They're just pre-fused. How did they even know what to fuse to? Was Silex directing them? Commanding them? How did they even get there? How did they know? Anyway. But, yeah, so there's no through line. Samus is answering a conflict that really has nothing to do with the Lemorn. It's just convenient that Silex happens to shoot the teleporter that sends them there. So there's no intrigue that the Lemorn really bring at the start. You just have... And again, it's that thing where not knowing at the start whether Silex has any plan or not, or knowledge, and you're like, oh, so is there a through line? You discover through the rest of the game and learning more that there is no through line. But, your brain convinces you there has to be a through line here. There's gotta be. It would make sense for there to be a through line for this whole Metroid, mind-controlling Metroid. The game opens up with the mind-controlling Metroid thing and Silex and the space pirates. And those just disappear. And, your brain thinks there's got to be a through line between Silex to this artifact, teleporter artifact, and him attacking the base and the Lemorn technology. No, there isn't. Just completely separate incidents that all happen to lead into the other with no connection. So, the mind-controlling, first off, is just the weird fact that only hyper-specific portions of the base get teleported into Vuros. So, and when Samus gets teleported back, where is she? Is she on Tanamar? Yeah, where is Samus at the end of the game? So, everyone on that Galactic Federation base is probably dead. They all died. Everything. Except for those few troopers who make it to Vuros. Is that it? What? Anyway. So the mind-controlling Metroids never come back. That's such a weird... Again, it has what I relate most to Rogue Galaxy, the level 5 games. Not level 5. Is it level 5? Yes, it is level 5. My mind mixed together next level games and level 5 into one thing. Level 5 games RPG Rogue Galaxy. That story is a mess. It's like multiple first drafts that barely start, and the game is just like taking you through each one and never... one day I'll talk about Rogue Galaxy, but that is not... It's not a good game. It's not a particularly good one. But anyway, Prime 4, it has that same thing of like, this is like multiple first drafts. This is a mess of a story, a lack of a story. So the mind controlling Metroid thing, it was like, that was one idea they had, and they're just like, I guess we're gonna keep it, but then they don't do anything with it. You get to the boss rooms and the Metroids have already pre-fused with all of the bosses. But it's such a weird thing that the mind-controlling Metroids are even a thing in the first place. It would be like if you played it would be like if you were playing a game and you, like a fantasy game. Imagine you're playing like a Final Fantasy or that's not a good example. Imagine you're playing like Devil May Cry. And you know the context for Devil May Cry. There's like devils and demons and things like that, and those are your enemies. Now imagine that all of the enemies for some reason had a weak point that was just like a creature that you never actually see or hear about, that also seems to be a threat that no one ever acknowledges. Like, it's full of like, all the enemies there are like angsty demons and monsters, but then they have a weak point attached to them that's like a creature called like a Zebnork. But then you never hear anything else about these creatures at all. And they're just there. They're the boss's weak points. Why couldn't they just have weak points according to their biology or their bodies? Or why are the weak points in Prime 4 mind controlling Metroids that it never comes up again? The only way they're referenced again is the scan log that just says gone mad due to fusion with a Metroid. And that is the extent of the mind-controlling Metroids after the opening of the game. Just completely unrelated to anything else that is happening. They just happen to form the weak points of the bosses. It's like, why? Why couldn't the bosses just have their own weak points? You know? Why am I fighting demons and then another species called Zebnorks for some reason is forming the weak points of the bosses, but then we never see them anywhere else or in any other context? You know, boss has gone mad due to fusion with a Zebnork. What is a Zebnork? I don't know. You don't get anything else. Also, the fact that Sylux spends the entire game basically sending out his shadow clones, his like, it was actually a holograms to go fight you, which means that Sylux spent the entire game. Also, why would you give someone sitting in a pod complete administrative access to your super tower? I don't... Why is it that whoever is sitting in that pod has complete control of the tower? That doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? Also, the fact that Sylux himself spends the entire game in a pod. When did he get there? Because you get teleported to the same tower that he spends all the game in. Did he, like... When did he get into the pod? Was he already there when Samus was talking to Chitoga, I believe is his name? The last priest of the Lemorn, the last Lemorn? Was he already just sitting in that pod? Either way, he spends the entire game just sitting in like a healing chamber pod that gives him free psychic powers. Actually, does it even give him free psychic powers? Or does it just give him reality warping powers for some reason? Like he's able to send into different dimensions. I'm not even exactly sure 100% what Psylocke even get. He gets a power up. I think it does give him psychic abilities. But like none of the abilities he really demonstrates have anything to do with being psychic. They're just like nanomachines that like it wouldn't even need to be controlled with psychic. You just control them with his suit, some kind of like mental interface. But I guess that, and even his flying, he has a jetpack. He can fly without needing to, use psychic abilities. I don't know what's up with that, but he spends the entire game sending out his duplicates to go fight you, even though he already lost the first fight. And then he just sleeps in that pod for the entire game, right into the ending. He's just sitting in there, right up until the final boss starts and he breaks out. So Psylocke doesn't do anything. He's just sleeping the entire game. Yet the game sets him up as the main antagonist. But he's really just sitting there in the background the entire time, not doing anything. Occasionally sends his shadow clones to pester you. And that's it. That's all he does. He just not even he. His duplicates provide mild inconveniences for you to overcome occasionally. I like the boss fights in Prime 4. That is probably the best part of Prime 4. I'm not going to say the previous Prime games had the most interesting bosses, but I would say that among the best I would say that there are several Prime 4 bosses that do rank among the better or best Prime bosses. They're not particularly, it's not a particular history of complexity when it comes to that. Except for Echoes. No, even then, most of them just have like one or two moves. Most Prime bosses have one or two moves, and just kind of repeat the same attacks over and over, and you just gotta watch out and keep dodging it the same way. I think the highest complexity you get with most Prime bosses is like, Quadraxis with its multiple phases, and they really got creative with that. And then like Metroid Prime itself. Man, Metroid Prime 3's final boss is really underwhelming. Just having like, and then the Aurora unit, but it's basically like two phases of just the Aurora unit, with Dark Samus also being there, splitting in two and doing that, then combines with the Aurora unit, but it just kind of stays the Aurora unit. It doesn't like become a phase-on anyway. But yeah, in Prime 4, the Psylocke boss fights, it's fun. Not the final one specifically, but the other ones where he does like a spinny tornado attack, and then he comes in and does like that swipe, or he puts his arm up and starts electrifying the floor. Like, those are neat. Those are pretty well executed. They got those combat, and even as basic as some of the other bosses are, they're the most mobily dynamic boss fights seen in a Prime game. I'm not particularly a fan of a lot of their physical design, except for like the Omega Griever has a cool design. I like that. Zelios really is just Helios, but with hexagons stuck over it. It's a little cartoony for my taste. I like what was the plant boss called? Carvex? That was a neat boss fight with it like spinning around. That's what I was gonna say. Is these bosses are probably the most engageable bosses. Some of the most engageable bosses across Metroid Prime. Like they really move a lot. That's the thing with like previous Metroid boss. They're like a series of sort of like stock animations that kind of lumber for a second, do their pattern, and then continue to sort of like move in their sort of predetermined ways. Stop, do another attack. But these bosses in Prime 4, they're really quite mobile. They're kind of all over the place, doing their thing. You can engage them as much as you want, go in, go out of like the flow of combat. And they're pretty realized. They're pretty realized. And they've got quite a few moves that force you to go morph ball, then switch back up, and then think about using this thing in your arsenal. And that's the thing is like stuff like the control beam. You just forget that you even have it most of the time. Getting to Fenoros and it falling over, and then you just got to remember that you even have that, and that's one of the best uses of the control beam. is sending it down Fenoris' throat to hit the Metroid core that's inside of its body. And you just kind of forget that you even have it. Kind of like that playing Ocarina of Time and forgetting some of the items that you have, and it's like, well, how do I solve this? Oh yeah, this thing I haven't used in a really long time. But yeah, so Silux, he's just in a pod for the entire game, sitting around, getting the psychic juices. Apparently, he was so damaged. That's the thing. None of the other Federation troopers are damaged. Samus isn't damaged. So how did all the other Federation troopers... What happened to them? The light engulfed the whole base. The space pirates were on the base. Why are there no space pirates breeding Metroids on Viros in a sneaky base somewhere? Or more Galactic Federation troop? What happened to that? There's nothing indicating that they should have died from the experience of getting teleported. Unless they didn't get teleported and they're still on Tanamar, except we don't get to see Tanamar, I don't think, at the end of the game. It doesn't look like Tanamar. It's got, like, grass and stuff. It's just kind of a generic planet somewhere. So that's a bit confusing. So I guess... Was Silux really damaged that much by Samus's one shot, like little pea shooter shot to his chest? Or did the pod do its thing anyway and he just found it? How did he know it would do that? How did he know that pod was going to give him super psychic powers? No, that's a part you could explain, that like maybe his suit has a scan function, but you needed the psychic gem to get the scan function. Even Samus's suit couldn't decode the language without getting the psychic gem implanted into her head. Also, technically, Samus has a companion character in the form of Chitoga as the psychic gem in her helmet. I feel like they could have really built on that more. Quite a bit, like a new iteration of Adam. You could have completely replaced Miles Mackenzie and the other Federation troopers with having Chitoga speaking his alien tongue and telling you stuff, or translating it into English, because the mind thing. They could have had Chitoga be the companion character who occasionally chimes in if you need help. Like, he could have taken over as the suit AI of Samus's suit. That could have been really cool. Anyway, so I guess Silux just kind of knew or not new. Again, just like everything else with Silex, he didn't know anything. I guess he just got in this pod, and it worked out. That it gave him super psychic powers. But, yeah. Anyway, I guess besides that, so he's just in the pod till the end of the game, and then he comes out. Here's something I really wanted to been talking about. That phase 1 is atrocious, but the second thing regarding his boss fight that annoys me to no end is, why does Silex spawn goofy dragons? Why are they dragons? Why does he spawn dragon heads? Not even like super stylized. They're like JRPG, Genshin Impact, Zenless Zone Zero, Hoyoverse, Xenoblade. Not even like the serious part of Xenoblade, where they really lean into some like grotesque creature design, the more cartoony stuff. Like Final Fantasy IX. Why does he spawn JRPG style dragon heads that shoot elemental attacks? It's like the lamest thing ever. And also the fact that it's Silex is like, dragons are cool. But why are they dragons? Why are the wolf creatures just wolves? Why are they called wolves? These on this alien planet, why are they just wolves? They're just called ice wolves. Well, green energy, ice wolves, great minds. Why psychic boots? Anyway, so why does he make goofy cartoon dragon heads? Why are they First off, why are they dragon heads? Why aren't they something like weird, grotesque alien, like energy projectors? Again, this all revolves around, this is Metroid, where the closest thing to a dragon you're going to get is Ridley, or Kraid, or Crocomire. Crocomire. Why? Do they even know what a dragon is? Like, contextual. Why are they dragons? Just normal looking JRPG dragon heads that he spawns, and you gotta shoot them until they break. They should be like grotesque, weird looking thingies attached to the ends of these nanomachine arms. It's just really goofy. It's incredibly goofy. It's incredibly tacky. It makes, again, it continues in another setting, in another story. It wouldn't have any effect on the character if it matched the art style or the direction or the general tone. It wouldn't. But on Silex, in a Metroid game, it just continues to make him look like he's trying really hard to be cool. Again, it's the same series where in Prime 1 they rejected a really cool alien design because they said it looked too much like an RPG monster. And now in Prime 4, you have Silex spawning JRPG dragon heads. And it just makes him look like a loser. This has nothing to do with, like, anime being for losers. I don't believe that for a second. Not even a second. I will gladly talk about it all day. But this would be like if... what am I thinking of exactly trying to say here? This would be like if an alien, one of the xenomorphs, had, like, the head of the Maleficent's dragon form from Sleeping Beauty. It's completely out of place, completely out of touch with what the rest of the setting is. That doesn't work here. It just makes Silex look like a child. trying to find ways to make himself look cool. I mean, next, he should just, like, generate a giant sword to attack Samus with, to go with his dragon heads, and give himself, like, a cape or something. It's just immature. It's not even a good use. It just makes him look really immature. I mean, the rest of the game does that anyway. He's just an immature whining baby who's just really angry the entire time, and he's just throwing a tantrum. He's just a loser. Sylux is a loser. That is the best way I can describe him. He's just a loser. I don't know how else to talk about this guy. And he's trying so hard to be cool. Like, I see you. It's just you and me. It's like, please be quiet. Go back to being silent. And your cool vertical green face light is the only way that you emote. Anyway. It's completely unfitting. So, let me keep thinking. Let me keep thinking here. So we got Sylux, and he's just kind of rude. He's a rude child throwing a tantrum. Oh yeah, that's right. I still don't understand how the second phase of his fight works. The final boss fight, you're in a blue vortex, and he's throwing light bars. What are you supposed to do? I guess you're just supposed to try and dodge it and wait for it to end? It doesn't make any sense at all. Anyway, I've seen a lot of people criticize the ending where Samus leaves the soldiers behind. I do think that you could justify it as, like, that was it. They're sacrificing all their lives, and the teleporter is going to disappear. Again, it's not an ideal writing situation, but I think it was good enough to get the job. It would have been better if Samus had been forced through the teleporter and she wanted to go back for them. Again, like, yeah, why doesn't... That was one of the first things I thought when he came back. It's like, fight him again. You just beat him. Fight him again. Attack Sylux again. He's weakened. You just fought him 3 times. Go at it. Go on. Scrap. Phase 4. But then, you know, I could see it, you know. It also is the fact that Samus is the one to push the button, and that the game pretends you have a choice on it, but really it should have found a better way to get her through the teleporter, still having the threat that, like, this is it, there is no going back. Well, that's the thing. The Lemorne, had she not done it, she would have failed to carry on the legacy of the Lemorne. But here's the problem, is that the Lemorne story is not strong enough to really feel like I've got to carry on their... Again, the story is so fragmented. It's the actual crux of the story being discover the history of the Lemorne, which you barely even do, isn't strong enough to even really be remembered that you have a memory fruit, and that the whole point was you're trying to save the Lemorne's legacy. But then you have a bunch of these soldiers in front of you who, you know, in character, you know, with, like, Ian Malkovich, Samus probably would do something to try to save... They could have had a conflict between, like, you know, Chitoga and Samus and the soldiers, or something like that, and, like, making it through the teleporter to try and carry on the Lemorne's legacy, and having to choose between these things, or making Sylux overwhelmingly powerful to the point where there's no point in fighting, and Samus is like, has to go through the teleporter. There's just not enough urgency to justify any of it. There's just too many questions and not enough urgency for the situation. And that's the next thing I want to bring up, is Sylux versus Dark Samus. Because they're put in somewhat similar positions, being rival hunters. But the thing about Dark Samus is that she was auxiliary to the whole incident on Aether. She was just a side piece. You were getting to see like a cool concurrent story, as you're making your journey through Aether. Dark Samus is also making her journey through Aether. And you occasionally clash, but Dark Samus is not... Dark Samus is only the final boss of Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, in the sense that she's just the boss you fight last. In terms of narrative, the final boss is Emperor Ing. And in terms of narrative, the only narrative that really matters to Prime 2 is the whole conflict of the Luminoth and the Ing. And even the final scene is Samus waving goodbye to the Luminoth. Dark Samus's involvement in Prime 2 is a bonus. It's like a side story, a side quest going on at the same time. And it's cool that you get to see her, and she's like overloaded with Phazon. And you can kind of see the Metroid Prime's face, but it's more human-sized. And, the suit is see-through. Like, that's really cool. But it's a bonus to the rest of the adventure. It's like a little cherry on top to the fact that you just had to get through fighting Emperor Ing, and now you get this one last confrontation with Dark Samus to conclude the side story that was going on. But then afterwards, it's like back to business as usual. Dark Samus is not the most important part of Prime 2 Echoes. As I said, her storyline in that is like dessert. It's a bonus to the rest of what's happening in that game. But for some reason, Prime 4 has the conceit that it's going to place Sylux as the main antagonist. Even Prime Hunters didn't place the other hunters as main antagonists. It still had it had the wisdom to have a bigger threat that all of the hunters are being drawn towards. And it's like using them somewhat in the plan, the through line. But the thing is, Prime 4 has no through line. So Sylux is like taking the Aether incident and for some reason not changing Dark Samus's story at all, but for some reason making her the main villain. Imagine if Prime 2 opened up with Dark Samus was spotted on the planet Aether in search of Phazon, and you have to go stave off its corrupting influence. But that's it. The rest of the game is exactly the same. You get to Aether, you see the troop, literally the rest is the same. The only thing that's different is the text at the beginning of the game for some reason tells you that the whole thing is revolving around Dark Samus. And you get there, and there's Ing. It's like, what? What does this have to do with Dark Samus? You started the game telling me about Dark Samus. You started the game telling me about Sylux and the Space Pirates. You get to Vuros, and it's like, we're the Lemorn. Protect our history. Get the memory fruit, which again, you barely even really do anything with. And I'll get into that in an idea I had for, again, making something out of what Prime 4 offers. But it would be like framing Dark Samus as the main antagonist of Prime 2 Echoes. But keeping the whole Luminoth and versus Ing thing but then for some reason barely addressing it, not really having any scan logs that go over it, and the game just keeps insisting that Dark Samus is the main antagonist, but then you go through large swaths of not even seeing her, and it barely even addresses the whole Luminoth. And it's like, Dark Samus is coming, I swear, but then that's it, and then you fight her as the final boss. And I guess on the side, there was a whole Luminoth-ing thing. That's really how Prime 4 is. It's the Lamorne. Why isn't the villain... And that's the thing about learning that Sylux didn't even know what was going to happen with the teleporter. It means that the main villain doesn't even have anything to do with the Lamorne. He wasn't going after them, he wasn't seeking their technology, their history, or anything. Sylux was literally just there, got a quick upgrade, and is the final boss. Completely separate from anything to do with the Lamorne conflict, which essentially boils down to they gathered up green energy, shot it into the atmosphere, it rained down, and turned a bunch of them into grievers. Now, they didn't know that was going to happen, and they tried to fix it. There's a better way to write that doesn't, unfortunately, have the consequence of potentially making them look incompetent. And it's not like they knew that was going to happen. But, why didn't they research that a little further? See what the effect of exposure to that much green energy on individual specimens, something like that. And maybe a villain who decided to, take things a little too far and douse everyone with it, and then they become grievers, and then, have a griever hive level. Anyway, something like that. But no, nothing to do with anything. Why wasn't Sylux, if you're not gonna... The way the game did it, just have him be a side piece to the entire adventure. Have him be like a bonus thing on the side. And I'll get into that actually in just a second. There's one part I want to talk about with the mech parts, which I think it's absolutely ridiculous that you have to hope you run into Rieger Takabi. Also, what's the whole thing with him and Solan? That's an entirely new thing. And I'm not necessarily questioning the idea of, religion. It's the universe of Metroid. There are cultures and species with religions and things like that. But they really push that as part of his thing when we've never heard of it before. It's never been a thing before. And it feels... everyone in the game is just forced empathy. Characters talking about their families, or like, I love you so much, Samus, or Miles McKenzie's skittish, getting nerdy and then constantly calling you, and he doesn't continue all the time that, like, it's gonna get real nerdy, but his constant interruptions and just, did you know you could go to this area? Have you tried doing this and that? And you go through all that. But the Salon stuff was like, well, they're really, really, like, pushing it, and just comes out, this is why I wear this. It's like, okay. Alright. and it's all so that they can have the whole necklace on the tree at the end. It's incredibly forced. It feels forced from the beginning, and it's for a forced memento, bit of reminiscence at the end. When she hangs the necklace on the tree, and it's like, okay, I guess that's what that was for. There wasn't any other depth to it or anything like that. Anyway, I wanted to talk about an idea I had for potentially how to, like, rework what Prime 4 has, which is, if you're going to have the opening and you're going to have Sylux not knowing, the idea I had was maybe include, like, one or two other bounty hunters or characters, and have Chitoga be more of, like... Basically, the idea is that whoever found the teleporter, they don't know... If multiple people come through, Chitoga doesn't necessarily know who the Chosen One is. And so all of them are granted some kind of like psychic powers. And the idea I had is that Chitoga basically commissions anyone who came through the teleporter. So that would be Silex, that would be Samus, that would be throw in like one or two other bounty hunters or soldiers or something, and tells them like basically makes it like a race or a competition, enlists them as potential chosen ones to go out and recover or try and preserve the history of the Lemorn. And it's basically a big trial test to see who comes out at the end and successfully does it. And Silex, like, he does his own thing, does it to try and gain power. He uses it as an opportunity to research more about the Lemorn, learn about their impressive technology, and occasionally encounter Samus through the adventure, and he uses it as a chance to gain power. Whereas Samus is more so being empathetic, but also keeping an eye on, other forces, or have it so that Silex was already enlisted before she even gets there, or something like that way to keep them separate. But he also was granted ability, and he's going out, but it's like a bit of manipulation on his part, and he's using it as an opportunity to get stronger. And the other idea I had is, you have the desert, but the idea I had is that, and again, this is to work with what they have there, is that the idea I had is that you use the psychic energy. I wrote it down. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it. I wrote it down in some notes. Ideas and stories. Psychic. Okay. Regions with a big desert in the middle. Time travel involved, ? As they progress in each area, the desert in the middle is replaced with more of the original land. When all areas meet in the middle, it reveals a central building that everyone wanted to reach. Story: they arrive in a central tower. They head to another area where it turns out most of the area connecting the desert to the outer area was made of mental/psychic energy. It ends up collapsing, leaving the desert in its place. Okay. So basically, they arrive in the central tower, and then they sort of fan out to the edges of Vuros, and it looks like the whole thing is whole, or no, I don't think that's quite it. I'm trying to remember the original idea. I think the idea was that there's the central tower, and then there's bridges leading out to the outer regions, but the desert is there. But when they get there, actually, no, I did say leaving the desert in its place. So it looks like a whole world with no desert, and then they fan out to the edge regions for whatever reason, whatever the plot reason is. And then the mental/psychic energy that was keeping that terrain there collapses, and instead it degrades into the desert. So the characters, or Samus at least, is like stuck in the outer fringes of Vuros. Okay, as they go, they regain the power needed to reconstruct the areas again, moving in further and further to where the tower was. The species that used to call this planet home is giving a bounty for who can record and save most of their history before the entire planet ceases to exist. So basically the idea is that as Samus gains psychic power, she the mental slash psychic energy, or even replace that with time travel. Like, let's say this energy has some time properties, and it's able to reverse the desert into more terrain, and the areas like move in towards the center. And basically Chrono Tower, I just realized it's called Chrono Tower, but the game doesn't even have time travel. Anyway, so make it time travel, make it psychic energy. I'm sure it's like flavor, but it could affect gameplay. So either one. And then the psychic energy or the time travel, it like replenishes the areas until you reach the middle and the tower reemerges again. And then, you have your final showdown, something like that. That's another idea of all the ideas I've had. There's another. Let me check my notes to make sure I'm done with... Yeah, Psylux fight dumb dragons. Okay. What else do I have? Dark Samus in Prime 2 versus Psylux in Prime 4. Okay, there we go. Okay, I can get rid of the music note too. Okay. Now I can talk about the more fundamental things, and maybe I'll end talking about Other M. I'm thinking about it. But, excuse me, kid. Let's see what I got here. 1, 2, that's you and me. We go for storm at the side of the sea. Okay, let's see. What's the point of all the sun? What's the land? I know you want me to pet you so much. I'm petting you, see? And then you meow anyway. Okay. So one thing I wanted to talk about is the fact that Metroid is the idea of tension in Metroid, and the way that people kind of strawman arguments about the tension in Metroid and the different tones. Here's the thing. Metroid has had humor. Metroid has had jokes, things that you could consider to be like funny. Here, I wrote down a thing for myself. There we go. I was thinking about that with Miles McKenzie, and that Metroid has had humor, but nothing like that. Metroid humor is situational or dark. Like getting jump scared by Crocomyre's skeleton only for it to immediately fall apart. Samus defeats Thardis, and one of its pebbles, smacks her on the helmet. The scan logs talking about how the space pirates keep subjecting themselves relentlessly to experiments no matter the outcome. They keep going and trying. They're talking about how they're going through rations and how, their soldiers are becoming irrational. And the sheer amount of torture and anguish that they put themselves through. The whole game of Prime, all you're hearing about is just how relentless and endlessly the space pirates experiment on each other and themselves, and how relentless they are, only to get to the scan logs talking about how they tried to recreate the morph ball, and and after only 1 or 2 tests they immediately abandon it. After the morph ball tests fail and they get crushed, and it's the only experiment that you read about, and it has a really humorous tone to it. It's dark humor, but you keep reading about how endlessly they go on about everything, and there's no links they won't be willing to go to. And then they try to do the morph ball experiment like once or twice and immediately give up. Just like, yeah, we're not moving forward. with the morph ball test. Just that joke about just how does the morph ball? No one can figure out the morph ball. Another bit of humor is Samus's reaction to. Down you go. Is Samus's reaction to Kraid, and the way she just stares at him, lifts up her arm cannon, and just shoots it into his mouth. That's another bit of humor in Metroid. Metroid has humor. It does jokes, but it makes sense to the world of Metroid, and it usually has to do with situational humor, dark humor, just something trying something and failing, not quite doing it right. But with legitimate consequences for the action involved. And, come on, Candy. I love you. Stay right there. There we go. I'll get rid of humor off my list. But, Metroid, and Metroid does have lighter moments. Look at things like the Edakuns and Decoras. Getting to save them, meeting them in the first place. And them teaching you the different moves. And you get to see friendly faces. Metroid has done these things, but it was in the form that worked for Metroid in the first place. It was what worked for Metroid in the first place. And I wrote this down as a note. Actually, before, I don't want to lose this, so I'm going to say it right now. I liked how in Metroid Dread, Samus finding her powers and then pinning the Chozo ex-soldiers down, draining the life force out of them. You don't even get to see what happens to them. You just see them flailing, and then she closes her hand with the energy. Anyway, I had that on my list, and I wanted to make sure I get that out of the way. But I wrote down something else on my list, which is the fallacy of... let me write this down. The fallacy of evolving and expanding the universe, which is, I've discussed before, which is just by doing something different, that it automatically means that things are expanding and for the good of the series, and that it's actually being developed when it's not. And let me just go through the last of my notes here. The Prime 4 desert as meta design. The desert wasn't actually world building, it was developer convenience and developer building. It existed less as a natural extension of the Metroid universe or the story, and more as a structural tool for the dev team to place a pause on the pacing, a place to deliver exposition, phone calls, a place to repeat tasks that don't escalate tension, a biome that looks like a generic desert rather than a Metroid-specific one. It's not that deserts can't be interesting. Metroid could absolutely make a surreal, alien, unsettling desert. But the desert in Metroid Prime 4 is a meta zone, a place for the developer's needs, not the world's needs. And because of that, it flatlines tension instead of transforming or carrying it. Metroid's real pacing philosophy. Metroid has always been brilliant at controlled decompression. It doesn't keep you at 100% tension all the time. It gives you victory laps after major bosses, groovy upbeat tracks that let your nervous system reset, safe rooms that feel like a warm exhale, transition zones that shift the emotional palette before the next threat. This is why the straw man argument of, oh, so you want non-stop tension is so dishonest. Metroid has never been non-stop tension, it's dynamic tension, with carefully placed valleys that still feel like Metroid. The issue with Prime 4's desert isn't that it lowers tension, it's that it completely breaks tension, and lowers tension in a non-Metroid way. And another thing about those victory laps after major bosses is that you finish a fight, and you're now like the most powerful being in that area. You're given the item or the weapon that you need, and the game makes sure to tell you like you're doing good, and it propels you with that new item you got into the next area where again the situation resets and you're no longer the top dog of that region. But it didn't break the tension or the atmosphere. It carried it like a baton pass and helped to move it into the next spot. And let's good nostalgia versus bad nostalgia. Good nostalgia recontextualizes old aspects or concepts, deepens the universe, honors the tone and identity of Metroid, feels like a natural evolution. Bad nostalgia repeats surface-level imagery, uses callbacks as shortcuts, ignores the emotional logic of the series, feels like remember this, remember me, instead of this belongs here. The Desert leaned towards the second... Let's see. Expanding the Metroid universe properly. Expansion isn't inherently good. People say I like when the world evolves, but often only praise expansions that are poorly executed, break the tone, introduce lore that contradicts the series' emotional core, or feels like fan fiction with a budget. And that's where I talked about Prime Hunters the other day, the way that it's the counter to that. Ooh, I'll get to the Federation in a second. The desert as a break from Metroid. The desert isn't just a biome, it's a break from Metroid's identity and as a game. Metroid deserts, if there is one, should feel alien, dangerous, atmospheric, full of ancient secrets, biologically strange. Instead, this one is just a normal Earth desert. A place where you receive exposition, a gameplay loop reset, and a complete tonal interruption. It's not a breather, it's a disconnection. Let me see if I can find the unit. They employ supply lines and reinforcements. Samus becomes a special ops soldier. It was sad, because I had a whole conversation with this, and I wrote down notes, and then I lost it. I had to rebuild the whole thing from scratch. And, here, tension was a core component, even when it was subtle. Super Metroid is the clearest example of a lot of the aspects, yes. But tension isn't only expressed through horror or difficulty. Metroid's tension is isolation, atmosphere, uncertainty, environmental hostility, the sense that you're trespassing, the feeling that the world is older and more dangerous than you. Even in games that are less oppressive, the elements are still present. They are part of the identity, even when dialed down or shifted. It's like saying stealth was never a thing in Metal Gear, because Metal Gear Solid 4 had more action. No, tone and identity don't just vanish just because later entries might drift. When people say that Super Metroid was the only one that had tension or tension in that way, later games didn't emphasize it so it's not important, or I never felt intention so it's not a core element. They're not describing the series, they're describing their preferred version of the series, or their own preferences. It's a rhetorical move, not an honest analysis. It's a subjective argument, not structural. When they say I never felt any tension, that's not a critique of the series, that's a critique of their own emotional response. That's like someone saying I never found a horror movie scary, so horror isn't a real genre. It doesn't erase the design intent. Metroid's tension is baked into music, sound design, pacing, environmental storytelling, lack of NPCs, hostile ecosystems, and slow and deliberate traversal. Even when the games are more action-heavy, the framework is still built for tension. People use these lines of reasoning often because they want to defend newer entries that drift from the original tone, don't want to admit the series has lost something, personally prefer a more action-oriented direction, conflate I didn't notice it with it wasn't there, or treat Super Metroid, which did set the tone for the series' identity through its impact, even if it was just one game, as an outlier instead of a blueprint. It's a way of flattening the series so that nothing feels like a misstep. Their argument is, if tension was never important, then nothing was lost. If nothing was lost, then every new direction is automatically a valid and good direction, positive direction to go in. It's a convenient narrative. It's not that Metroid has to be nonstop dread and tension, or that every game has to be Super Metroid 2 or horror. It's that tension is one of the emotional pillars of Metroid, and removing it changes the entire flavor of the series. Not just eliminating tension entirely, or not eliminating tension entirely even, just flattening it makes Metroid feel less like Metroid. Let me see, let's see. Yeah, identity comes from impact, not frequency. Super Metroid didn't need to hammer tension into every room, or make it so that every following game did it exactly the same. All it needed to do was hit hard enough that the feeling became a part of the series' DNA. When people say Super Metroid was the only one that did it, so it's not core, that's not how artistic identity works. It's like saying Ocarina of Time. That's not how artistic identity works. Look at similar examples. Ocarina of Time defines Zelda's tone, even though later games may have drifted or not done it exactly the same. Alien defined the franchise's atmosphere, even though Aliens was more action-heavy. Dark Souls 1 defined the soul of the series, even though later entries changed the pacing. A single powerful entry can set the emotional blueprint for everything that follows. It doesn't need to repeat itself. It established the grammar of the series. Metroid's identity is built on emotional landmarks, not repetition or frequency or how often it happens. It's built on the first time you step into Crateria and feel the rain, the first time you descend into Lower Brinstar and the music drops, the first time you realize you're alone on a hostile planet, the first time you see a Chozo statue that feels like a relic of a dead civilization. They're impact events. They define the series, even if games later only echo them lightly. Prime 4 introduces a desert that is generic, predictable, structurally convenient, tonally disconnected. It's not just a different direction. It's a break from Metroid itself. It's like the game is telling you you can stop playing the game for a second and go do something else. It's like the game is telling you to stop playing Metroid for a second and go do something else. It's not carrying the tone or it's not carrying the tone or building any momentum or acting as a breather space. It's a complete dead zone for what Metroid is tonally, and Metroid doesn't need to be scary all the time or oppressive all the time, but it does need to respect the impact moments that shaped its identity. Let me see here. There's some other things I would like to talk about, a pretty complex issue. Yeah, the straw man of people saying, so you want 100% tension all the time? So you hate pacing, so you want every game to be Super Metroid, so you want non-stop tension. You must not like good stories where it's not 100% oppressive or tension all the time. Straw man arguments. Metroid has never been 100% tension. It has valleys, breathers, victory laps, upbeat tracks, safe rooms. But those valleys still feel like Metroid valleys. Atmospheric, alien, mysterious. The desert isn't a valley, it's a genre break. Eerie, calm. So when Metroid does lower tension, it lowers it in a Metroid way. Eerie, calm, alien beauty, atmospheric music, subtle unease, quiet mystery. And I wrote this down as, the difference is, there's a difference between the tension dipping for a moment and the tone collapsing. The deflection of "I like when the series expands and evolves." This is a shield, not an argument. People say this when they want to defend a direction they like, even if it contradicts the series' identity, but expansion isn't inherently good. Hunters expands the universe successfully. Fusion expands Samus's character successfully. Prime 1 expands lore successfully. But it only works when it respects the emotional core. Oftentimes when people say "I like when it evolves," what they often mean is, "I like this new thing, so I'm going to pretend the old rules never existed." And I wrote down here, when Metroid did lower tension, it did so by creating a segment that carried the tone and atmosphere to the next area. When it did so, it would even have more upbeat music and add in some groove and funk. The closest example I can think of is Phendrana Drifts, which begins as this cold, chilled music. Then after the boss, you get to Phendrana Drift's depths, and the music is groovy and more upbeat and victorious as it carries and propels Samus into the next moment with her newly acquired equipment. And that was something I wrote down about Prime 4's Desert. Is in Prime 4's Desert, part of the biggest problem with it is that you know exactly what you're going to do when you get into it. You're going to run around, there's going to be green crystals, you smash into them. You're going to find some shrines that you can barely even interact with at the start of the game, so you might as well just wait till the end of the game. The puzzles themselves are dumb, the shrines are barely explained, they're barely anything. I don't even know why the shrines are there in the first place, really. Really, why they're even there in the first place. They barely do anything. The puzzles in them, and they're just completely generic. And the puzzles in them are just non-puzzles. So, you get into the desert, you always know what you're going to do. Here's part of why it flatlines the tension. You always know what you're going to do when you get there. You're going to ride around, there's going to be nothing. A wheel enemy is going to show up, a flying enemy. You charge up your hockey puck, you shoot it at it, boom, it's over. Oh yeah, I just remembered to mention, like, the viola test range where you get your license and that rock music is playing. Again, indulgent. Anyway, but you get into the desert, basic combat, you can destroy everything with your hockey puck. You're going to run into stuff you can't even interact with. You ride around smashing into green crystals. There's not even a boss fight until you need the mech parts, which is like at the end of the game. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention the fact that Takabi is just somewhere in the desert and you're probably not even going to find him, but if you go back to base camp, he's there, and they don't really tell you anything. He's like in two places at once, and you can completely miss him, go to the thing and say, "What do I do?" and he's there, and doesn't give you any information, and then you just go to the desert and find... That whole sequence is really dumb. But anyway, the desert's completely predictable. You also know that the desert is like your phone call zone. So you know that you're never going to have to expect anything dangerous out of that zone. You go there, and that's where people tell you to do stuff. Also, the fact that the game completely lies to you multiple times, makes you go places only to tell you, actually, don't go there, this is locked off, you can't make progress, sends you back across the entire map. The fact that you need Mackenzie to basically, like, Adam Malkovich style authorize you. Why does Samus need... Yeah, Samus's suit is incredibly Why does she need... Again, this is stuff other people have talked about. It's completely ridiculous that Samus needs this guy to put this thing into her suit. She has dealt with more advanced technology before than a chip. Anyway. And the fact that you need this game's idea of backtracking, which is just going somewhere, halting all progress, telling you can't do anything, and then sending you back across the map. Anyway, there are people who have talked about it better than I probably could. But the game's idea of progression being that, just, there's no, like, loops or clever ways that it sends you back to places, no teleporters. Also, Samus running to get the those loading scenes where Samus is just running really fast through a hallway is incredibly goofy. That's another thing I want to talk about. Here, let me talk about this really quick. I forgot about this earlier. I don't like Viola. I don't like that it's a motorcycle. I don't like the design of Viola. I think its design is really dumb. It would have been cool if instead they would have used like those wheel robot design for Samus's vehicle. Why is it a motorcycle? Make it a cool sci-fi vehicle. Use it so that it's like a frame and Samus has to sit in the middle of it and her gem creates her psychic gem creates the body of the vehicle. Have the vehicle just be like a giant wheel. And then Samus is like floating in the middle of it using her psychic powers to control the vehicle to move across. Don't make it a motorcycle. Make it like a cool sci-fi wheel, like singular mono wheel that like travels through. Anyway, that's it for that. But yeah. You defeat the boss, get a new tool, tension spikes, and then releases. And then forward-moving, triumphant, rhythmic, funky victory lap. Momentum to carry you into the next area. You earned this. Take a breath. Enjoy the power you just gained. Now carry that energy into the next challenge. That's how Metroid lowers tension without losing its identity. It's not a break, it's a bridge. Yeah. The desert is, again, going back, it's meta. It's a place for them to give you exposition. It's a place to give you phone calls. It's a place to interrupt you. It's predictable. Yeah. It breaks all the tension completely, and then you end up having to reset the entire mood and tone. It halts everything. Tension rises, peaks, releases, transforms, and carries forward. The desert doesn't carry anything forward. It completely drops it. So you have to lower it in a way that still feels like Metroid. Whereas the desert lowers tension in a way that feels like a completely different game. Here, let me go through the last of these notes. Yeah, Samus is kept at the center of the universe's mythology. As ideas, that makes it feel like it belongs. Bad expansion belongs in a different franchise. Too structured, too political. Okay. I'm going to... Yeah. I wrote, even though Samus faced threats with galactic ambitions, it was always while they were incubating their plans, still unknown to everyone else. It becomes different when the villain actively starts waging war against greater society. Now planets are involved. The universe has been foolishly left open. The Galactic Federation brings this antithesis. The Galactic Federation brings this antithesis of structure, some organized government. Metroid's villains are always incubating, not truly invading. The Phazon, X-Parasites, Metroids, Ing, the threat is hidden, embryonic, contained to a single planet or facility unknown to the wider galaxy. Discovered only because Samus happens to be there or responded. Preserves the mythic isolation. She isn't fighting a war, she's uncovering a catastrophe before it becomes a war. She's the scalpel, not the army. When the villain starts waging an open war, the genre changes. The moment a villain attacks a planet, invades a colony, wages a war on civilization, becomes a known active threat, the story stops being Metroid and becomes Star Wars, Mass Effect, Halo, a space opera with fleets, politics, and armies. Metroid cannot sustain that scale without losing its identity. Samus works because she is the one who finds the threat before anyone else knows it exists. Once the threat is public, she becomes redundant. She's just a soldier in a larger conflict. The Galactic Federation breaks the emotional geometry. It's not bad as a concept, but structurally incompatible with Metroid's core tone when used too loudly. Why? And I had wrote this down. The Federation implies supply lines, reinforcements, fleets, political oversight, known space, mapped sectors, bureaucratic response, military escalation. As long as the Galactic Federation is around and waging a war, this isn't Samus's conflict anymore. She's just a special ops soldier, babysitting other soldiers, or acting as like a counter, like a infiltration unit for she's just special forces for the military. But if something goes wrong, the Galactic Federation can just call more fleets. You know there's an infrastructure out there to support this conflict, and that's part of the problem with Prime 3 in terms of how it messes with the tone. Like how I was talking about before, how everything that is Metroid breaks under the weight of what Prime 3 tries to do. Is that, yeah, Metroid's universe works because it feels sparsely charted, sparsely explained, full of secrets, full of things civilization hasn't touched, ancient, ruined, secrets, sparsely charted, yeah. The Federation makes the galaxy feel small and civilized, not vast and mysterious. Samus becomes a soldier instead of a figure. When the Federation is too active, Samus becomes a special ops agent, a contractor, a pawn in a larger war, and even a replaceable asset. Samus is compelling because she is a lone hunter, a mythic wanderer, one who goes where no one else can. The person who uncovers threats before they erupt, the galaxy's secret protector. Not a soldier in a war, someone who prevents the war at all. And the real danger of the Galactic Federation is that they leave the universe open. Too populated, too politically active, too mapped and too structured. You lose the sense that Samus is exploring the unknown. Part of the magic comes from the fact that Samus is always one step ahead of civilization, discovering horrors before they reach the light. If the universe is open, then it becomes a question of why the Federation shouldn't already know about these threats. Fleets should be responding. Scientists should be studying. Samus shouldn't be alone. The stakes become geopolitical instead of personal. That's not Metroid. In Prime 3, you're fighting in the Federation's war, basically. And that's not even something I wrote down here. Just in Prime 3, you are fighting the Federation's war. You're fighting their conflict. Which is part of why it breaks the tone. There's fleets and shipyards out there now. No matter where you are, even if you're physically alone, it's always in the back of your head that there's a support net. There's a safety net of the Federation in the background. Metroid's threats can grow to being cosmic in scale, but they're intimate in presentation. The moment you make the threat public, the moment you evolve planets and governments, the moment you turn the conflict into a war, you break that emotional architecture and structure. And then I wrote, the Galactic Federation is not inherently bad. Their best use was in Prime 2, as they're taken out by the Ing long before Samus even arrives. The Federation exists, but only as a corpse. In Prime 2, it's not issuing orders or calling Samus or sending reinforcements or shaping the plot or overshadowing Samus. They're already gone. Their presence is storytelling, not narrative inference. Not narrative interference, it's environmental storytelling. You see abandoned ships, dead troopers, logs of their final moments, and evidence of their failed mission. It grounds the universe. The Federation is real. They're out there. They tried to help, but they failed. They're not coming back, and Samus is now alone. It's the perfect balance. Their failure elevates Samus. It doesn't diminish her. Yeah, their defeat reinforces the tone. Because they're already wiped out and not coming, you don't get why don't they send backup, why isn't a fleet arriving, why is Samus doing this alone? The answer's baked into the environment. They tried, they failed, and now it's your turn. It keeps the stakes intimate, not geopolitical. Their role is atmospheric, not structural. A contrast to Samus's capability, a tone setter, a warning, a narrative ghost, not a quest giver, an authority, a military presence, or a political force. They worked as expanding the universe without opening it up, added structure without imposing structure, and deepened the lore without changing the genre. Yeah, there's just too many logistics when you involve the Galactic Federation as a player in the game. Yeah, their defeat reinforces the scale of the threat. This